Next on BBC4, can we look beyond our comfortable convenience lifestyles for the sake of the planet? The Selfish Green with Jonathan Dimbleby.
We're talking about the loss of whole ecosystems. We're talking about the disappearance of everything we have known in certain parts of the world. And I don't think I'm being over-dramatic.
What we're talking about requires very big changes, and which will require people not just paying lip service, but really believing it is true and putting things behind it. Now, that means that they ought to be converted. They ought to actually think that the natural world is precious.
If you did a census of all species on Earth at the moment as to which species would be the best one to disappear for the future sustainability of the planet, it would be us.
If astronomers told us that a comet of the size of the one that destroyed the dinosaurs is heading our way, presumably the whole human species would start pulling together and would start getting their heads together, having meetings, trying to think of ways of averting the catastrophe.
Our world is threatened by environmental catastrophe and crippled by our own greed. Are we really too selfish to save it? In The Selfish Green, 4 leading campaigners debate the issues. Every 2 years, the international community of wildlife filmmakers migrates to the city of Bristol for the flagship festival known as Wildscreen. One event that has captured the imagination of every delegate is an environmental debate with an enigmatic title, held at the Bristol Old Vic Theatre.
Welcome to the Old Vic for a mega discussion which is about nothing less than the future of life on our planet. The challenge has been set by Wildscreen, which is the biggest gathering of natural history filmmakers you'll find anywhere on Earth. And I can think of no panel better able to face the challenge of debating these issues than the distinguished quartet we've got here. Richard Dawkins, eminent interpreter of Darwin, author of The Selfish Gene, and therefore, of course, of our title this evening, The Selfish Green.
Oxford University's Professor for the Public Understanding of Science, Richard Dawkins is an outspoken polemicist who's often courted controversy. In his first book, The Selfish Gene, Richard radically reinterpreted Darwin, forcing us to rethink how we see ourselves and the world, focusing on gene selfishness, the idea that organisms exist solely to reproduce their own genes.
My life is about studying natural selection and explaining natural selection to people and the power of natural selection. In many ways, it's the first wonder of the world.
Richard Dawkins believes that as the most powerful species on Earth, we will have to think long-term, overriding our selfish genes to become altruistic, not only to save other species, but our own as well.
Sir David Attenborough, wildlife filmmaker emeritus, if he'll take the phrase, and someone I know needs no introduction to this audience.
Sir David has done more than anyone else in the world to promote a love of nature. His first BBC wildlife series, Zoo Quest, led to a lifetime of natural history broadcasting.
The emperor penguin.
Sir David has witnessed many dramatic changes to the natural world. And though he's reluctant to preach conservation, his State of the Planet environmental series revealed his thoughts and concerns.
The future of life on Earth depends on our ability to take action. Surely we have a responsibility to leave for future generations a planet that is healthy and habitable by all species.
Jane Goodall, who's devoted much of her life to campaigning for the survival of the great ape species, gorillas, chimpanzees, orangutans, and now more widely is campaigning for the United Nations as an ambassador, a messenger for peace.
Jane Goodall has changed our perception of what it is to be human. With her research on chimpanzee behaviour, she's challenged old definitions and assumptions.
I don't think anybody could fail to believe that chimpanzee infants and human infants have the same kind of emotional needs and emotional expressions.
As a young woman, Jane travelled to Africa to study chimpanzees at Gombe Reserve on the banks of Lake Tanganyika. After 18 months of patient observation, she helped capture new chimp behaviour on film for the first time. A PhD and over 30 years of research ensued. She now travels the world with her Roots and Shoots project, educating young people to support and sustain their natural environment in 87 countries.
And Richard Leakey, the world's most renowned paleoanthropologist, and who now argues that we're threatened by what he calls the sixth extinction.
Richard Leakey has worn several different hats to make his unique impact on the world. He's been paleontologist, anthropologist, conservationist, and politician. He's helped to change our understanding of human origins. His digs near Lake Turkana found bones of some 400 early humans. He's ensured the survival of elephants in his native Kenya, and he now strives for change in the political arena. In 1989, President Moi asked Richard Leakey to head the Kenyan Wildlife Service. It was facing a crisis. 85% of Kenya's elephants had been lost to poachers. He took them on and won, initiating a ban on the trade in ivory. What he did was burn $3 million worth of Kenya's ivory. Through his books and lectures, Richard continues to bang the drum for environmental conservation.
We live, of course, in a world that is alarmed by global terrorism, disfigured by global poverty, and threatened by environmental catastrophe. It happens to be my belief that we don't often recognise enough that these three apparently distinct phenomena are very closely linked. In large measure, it's self-evident that our species is both the cause of the problem and its potential solution. So I want to start, if we may, with the challenge that we face, the question of survival. Coming at it from your particular perspectives, how great and what is, for you, Richard Leakey, the challenge?
I think one has to be very careful not always to present the negative. And I have to say that the ability to change people's attitudes and the whole positive approach that something can in fact be done may be a more useful way to go into this in future. And people say, well, what do you mean? Well, part of our problem is poverty, human poverty, and part of our problem is human ignorance. And both of those conditions were manifest in many parts of the what now so-called Western world just after the Second World War. And many people in this room and others will remember that the Thames was filthy, the cities were dirty, you couldn't wear a white shirt like Richard's for more than a morning without having to change it for the afternoon. Today many of our cities are really quite clean. Many of our rivers have been restored. And if you go to Western countries, the green movement is very real. It wasn't 20 years ago. If this can be done in that half of the world, can it not be equally possible to do it in the rest? And I think it can.
Jane Goodall.
Well, what's happening to this planet with the environmental destruction, the pollution, the threat of global warming, and on top of all, and this and many other ways in which we are harming the environment with our chemical pesticides and fertilizers. And we can't really think about addressing any of the environmental problems unless we first address poverty. But we have to address them at the same time, because I don't think we've got time to wait. And And ignorance, absolutely. Ignorance, which means that people think one way without ever having been given the opportunity in the right way to open their minds, where people have lived without the sun of knowledge coming through to them. And that makes them bigoted, and it makes them fundamentalist, because they haven't ever had an opportunity to think differently.
David Attenborough.
I think the big question that faces the world is how long the human race is going to increase in numbers. It can't do so indefinitely. The fundamental cause of much of the poverty of which you've been speaking is the number of people that are in a particular area. The fundamental cause of the mass destruction of the environment in great parts of the world is in order to allow for the increase in numbers of people. The fundamental cause of some of the appalling, tragic disasters and famines is because too many people are trying to live in too small an area. The world is finite. It cannot take an infinitely growing number of people. What you can demonstrate is that so often one of the best ways of decreasing population growth is to increase the material wealth and economic wealth of a community.
Richard, how do you come to this from your perspective?
There are some mistakes that people can make, that we can make, which are correctable later. And there are other mistakes which are irrevocable. And one of the things about worrying about the future of the world is thinking about those things which can never be undone, like the extinction of some species, or worse, the extinction of some ecosystem. So these are very serious problems, if only if you think in terms of the irrevocability. When we think of things like poverty, when we think of things like overpopulation, and I agree with everything that's been said, we presumably have to try to identify those places where the interests of the human population and the interests of wildlife and ecosystems can somehow be made to go together rather than be conflicting with each other. Is there some way we can manipulate things such that we have a non-zero-sum game, that everybody can be the winners? I'm not entirely optimistic about that, because it seems to me that in many places the interests of the human population are very hard to reconcile with the interests of the wildlife population. But some of the people I respect most are trying to bring those two apparently conflicting interests together, and I hope they succeed.